Story time.
There's a stretch of farmland just outside of Dry Creek where nothing grows anymore. Locals avoid the place, even in daylight. They say the earth is cursed, burned from the inside out by something not of this world. But that wasn't always the case. In 1992, the Bell family moved there, fresh from the city, looking for a simpler life. Greg and Linda Bell, with their two kids, Jack, 12, and Emily, 9. The land was cheap, suspiciously so, but they didn't ask too many questions. The first week was perfect. Quiet mornings, fresh air, golden fields. Then, the animals started acting strange. The chickens refused to leave the coop, eyes wide and twitching. Their dog, Daisy, once friendly and calm, spent nights growling at corners and snapping at shadows. Then, one morning, Linda found a calf dead in the barn, its skin peeled back as if unzipped, organs untouched, eyes missing. Greg called the sheriff, but there was nothing to go on. There were no tracks, no blood trail, just the smell of copper and something worse, something like rotting pine needles and burnt hair. That night, Emily swore she saw something in the cornfield. "It looked like Daddy," she whispered, "but it smiled too wide." Greg brushed it off. She's just spooked. But later, when he walked past the living room window, he froze. Out past the field, just where the moonlight faded, something stood. Something tall. Too tall. Its limbs were wrong, longer than they should be, and its head tilted like it didn't understand how necks worked properly. Greg grabbed his rifle and stepped onto the porch, but it was gone. The next day, their dog vanished. Jack found her collar buried beneath a pile of leaves, soaked through with blood. The air grew heavier each night. The wind carried voices, soft, wrong, like hearing your own name in someone else's voice. Emily stopped speaking altogether. She just stared out the window and whispered to herself. Then came the knocking. It started low, tapping at the walls just before midnight. Not on the door, but the walls, as if something were testing the house, feeling for weak spots. Greg stayed up one night with lights off and his gun loaded. The knocking came again. He didn't move. Then, the front door creaked open on its own. Greg raised the gun up. "Daddy?" Emily stood in the doorway, barefoot, her dress soaked in dew. But Greg knew she had been upstairs, sleeping. He didn't lower his gun. Instead, he spoke. "Come inside, sweetie." The girl blinked slowly and smiled. Too wide. He fired. The body hit the floor and then dissolved into black ash that blew away in the windless room. He could hear the screams from upstairs. Linda had found the real Emily, still asleep. Whatever had worn her daughter's face was something else, something old, something hungry. They tried to leave the next morning, but the car wouldn't start. Their phone lines were dead. Greg tried to walk to town. He never came back. That night, Linda locked every door and window, clutching a kitchen knife while her kids huddled behind the couch. The thing came anyway. It didn't break in. No. It crawled in, under the floorboards, through the heating vents, through the cracks between the windows, shifting, stretching, changing. One moment, it looked like Greg. Next, like Jack. Then, like something made of raw sinew and bone, clicking and popping like it was learning to be human. Linda fought. She screamed and slashed, but the thing was fast, stronger than anything she'd ever seen. Jack and Emily fled to the barn. Inside, Jack found an old journal wedged between the rafters. It was brittle, pages yellowed with age. It belonged to the previous owner, Eli Baird. "It wears the faces of what it kills," one entry read. "If you see your kin after you know they're dead, it ain't them. Burn the body, salt the ground, never speak its name." Jack didn't know what name Eli was referring to, but the last entry chilled his blood. "It lives in the hollow, the place where the soil is soft but nothing grows. That's its nest. Bury the bones there and pray it doesn't remember your scent." Lightning split the sky. The creature shrieked outside, sounding like a chorus of all their voices mashed together. Linda screaming, Greg sobbing, even Emily's innocent laughter warped into something monstrous. Jack looked at his sister. "We have to end it." They waited until dawn. With nothing but a gas can, matches, and Eli's journal, they walked to the edge of the fields where the crops never grew. The hollow. The ground felt spongy, wet though it hadn't rained. Flies buzzed, thick in the air. They dug. 3 feet down, they hit bone. Human skulls, dozens of them. Some still had scraps of skin attached. Jack didn't ask questions. He poured the gasoline in and struck a match. The ground screamed as it burned. Not the fire, but the earth itself, like something ancient being ripped apart. The flames turned blue, then white, then silence. That night, the wind didn't carry voices. The knocking stopped. The sky cleared. They walked to town the next morning, barefoot and hollow-eyed. No one believed their story, but no one questioned when the Bell Farm was bulldozed and salted a week later. Now, 30 years later, the land is quiet. But when the wind comes from the east and the moon hangs too low in the sky, dogs still whimper facing that empty field. Some say the skinwalker is dead. Others say it just went deeper. Waiting. Listening. Learning. They say the Miller farm was cursed long before the family vanished. Folks around Hollow Pine knew better than to go near it after dark. Even in daylight, the barn sat like a rotting tooth in the earth, blackened wood, half-collapsed roof, and a stench like wet fur and mildew that never left, no matter the season. But 21-year-old Jake Warren didn't believe in curses. He believed in opportunity. So when the town council offered him a check to clean up the Miller property for redevelopment, he took it. It was just an old farm. What was there to be afraid of? Jake arrived on a cloudy morning with his tools, a packed lunch, and his old mutt, Rusty. The house had already collapsed into itself, but the barn still stood, crooked and defiant. As Jake approached, Rusty began to growl, ears back, tail tucked. He'd never seen the dog act like that. "Easy, boy. It's just a barn." He stepped inside. Dust choked the air, spiderwebs stretched between every beam. In the center of the floor was a pile of old hay, darker than the rest, like it had been soaked in something. Above, the hayloft was hidden in shadow, though Jake swore he heard movement up there. Scraping. Slow. Deliberate. He called out, half joking. "Anyone up there? Any, ghost cows?" No answer. Rusty refused to cross the threshold. Jake shrugged it off and got to work, clearing debris, tossing rotted tools aside, sweeping the floor. The deeper he went, the more he noticed something was wrong. The air moved, not like a breeze, more like breath. He looked up again. The hayloft was still too dark. Jake decided to check it out. The wooden ladder groaned under his weight. He reached the top and shone his flashlight around. Empty, except for a crude symbol scrawled in black across the back wall. 3 jagged lines intersecting a spiral with what looked like claw marks beneath it. The hay smelled rancid. Something squished under his boot. He lifted it. Meat. Rotting. Raw. He turned to leave, heart pounding, and that's when he heard it. A clicking sound, deep and wet, like something shifting inside a throat that wasn't built right. It came from the far corner of the hayloft, where the shadows were thickest. Then a shape moved, low to the ground. The limbs were wrong, but it was fast. Jake didn't wait. He practically fell down the ladder and hit the dirt floor running. Rusty barked wildly, snapping at the darkness behind him. Jake slammed the barn door shut, heart racing, chest heaving. What the hell was that? The town clerk hadn't mentioned anything about a thing living in the barn. Jake drove back into town and asked around, but the locals went quiet at the mention of the Miller place. Old Mr. Harlan finally spoke. "You saw it, didn't you?" Jake nodded. Harlan stared into the distance. "That thing ain't new. It's always been there. Miller found it in the hayloft when he was just a boy. Said it wore his daddy's face once. Crawled out of the wall. Said it fed on screams." Jake laughed nervously. "Come on, man." Harlan did not laugh. "They fed it animals for years, till they ran out. Then it took the whole damn family." Jake didn't sleep that night. Rusty paced the floor, whining. At 3:11 a.m., the barn light came on all by itself. He hadn't even wired electricity. The next morning, he returned with gasoline and a lighter. He was done playing. Rusty barked nervously as Jake poured gas along the barn floor and up the ladder into the hayloft. The shadows up there moved, even in daylight. Jake felt something watching him. Something hungry, patient. He lit the match. The flames caught fast. The barn hissed like it was alive. Then, something screamed from inside. Not human, not animal. A shriek like teeth grinding glass and a dying horse's wail. The barn groaned. The roof cracked. The air turned cold. Jake turned to run, but the barn didn't burn. The flames danced across the wood, but didn't consume it. The symbol on the wall flared bright red, pulsing like a heartbeat. And then the door slammed shut behind him. Darkness. Clicking. Jake backed toward the center of the barn, heart pounding. Rusty howled outside, scratching frantically at the door. Something descended from the hayloft, slowly, not falling, but crawling, clinging to the walls like an insect. It was tall, skin stretched tight over a warped skeleton, face twitching patchwork of features, eyes that weren't eyes, a jaw that opened sideways. It whispered his name. Jake dropped the lighter. The thing lunged. Rusty burst through a side panel, knocking Jake out of the way. The creature shrieked and vanished into the shadows. Jake didn't stop running until he reached his truck. He never went back. He took the long way around town to avoid the road near Miller property. The barn never burned, no matter what he did. No one believed his story. But no one argued when the council quietly canceled the redevelopment plan. Now the barn stands empty, though some say they still see the light turn on at night. And sometimes, when the wind is still and the sky is black, you can hear something moving in the hayloft, waiting.
Leave a like.